Hello, welcome to another immigration art video. My name is Art Serratelli. So if you've got any kind of question, give us a call. The topic of today's video is the J-1 Cultural Exchange Visitor Visa. What is a J-1 visa and why do we have it? A J-1 visa is simply a visa category created by the United States Department of State to facilitate cultural exchanges by bringing people to experience the United States on a cultural level. It could be academic related. Professors can come here. Students can come here. And then they're supposed to go back home and share with all their friends and family members how great America was. But it's not just students and professors. It could be babysitters. There's an au pair program in the J-1 program. It could be young people still in college in their home country who come for a summer to work at an American resort. You could find folks working in grocery stores, 7-Elevens, in hotels. That is a cultural experience they will have in the United States. To get an idea of how many subcategories there are in the J-1 Cultural Exchange Visitor Program, let's look at the following website. Why do we have this program? I'm not real certain, but here's my guess. It sounds very so 6 decades ago. First of all, we have an internet. If you come to America and you want to tell all your friends about how great it is, if in fact you think it's great, do you have to go home and tell them? Can't you just post it on Facebook? Or can't you make a YouTube video for all your friends to see? The concept that you need to be a cultural exchange visitor to let your friends and family know back home what America is all about, that is so pre-internet, it's kind of outdated. To be really honest, do you really need to go back home? So let me get this straight. I got to visit America, absorb the American culture, and then go home? And how long am I supposed to stay at home? And the answer is for 2 years. There's only 2 things that absolutely force you to go home. The first is if your government or our government gave you money to pay for your exchange visit to the United States. And the second is the skills list. If you're coming to America to learn a skill that is listed on your home country's skills list, well then part of the deal is you're supposed to go home and take the knowledge of the skill you learned in America and use it back home in your home country. Skills list, what are you talking about? Skills list. Where is this list? Nobody told me at the embassy that there was any list against which my experience would be judged. Well, wouldn't it be good if I knew where this list was before I applied for the J-1? So I'm making an informed decision. Where is this list? And the answer is at the following website. So you got to go home for 2 years without a doubt if those 2 things, one or the other, applies to you. Unless, are you ready? Unless you can get a waiver of the 2-year home residency requirement. Another way to say that is if you can get a waiver, a permission slip to not go home for 2 years. And there are 5 ways to get a waiver of the 2-year rule. Well, wouldn't it be nice if I knew where those 5 ways to get a waiver of this 2-year returning home rule, if I knew where those reasons were on the internet? Are they out there somewhere? And the answer is, yes, they are, at this website. Waiver category number 1, the no objection statement. This means if your government or our government, the United States government, funded your exchange visit, or if your course of work or study or teaching in America gives you a skill that's on the skills list, you can simply ask your government if they object to your staying here. And let's look at 3 examples. Example 1, your government. Say you're from Germany and your local municipality gives you a scholarship of $5,000 to go to college in America as a J-1. If you want to stay after the J-1, you could always go to the German embassy and ask, do you care? Do you object? Do you object if I stay here in America? And the German embassy will probably say, we don't care. Get a letter from the mayor of the town that gave you the scholarship, and if they don't care, we don't care. We have no objection. So that's good. Okay. Example number 2. Warning, if our government, say the Fulbright Scholarship Program, gives you money to study here, and you ask the United States government, you gave me $27,000 under the Fulbright program to come to America, study, and then in exchange for that money and my promise to study, and I took the money and I did study, now I don't want to go back. Is that cool? Can I just stay here? And Fulbright is going to tell you, no, it is not cool. So what do you learn from this? Don't, I mean do not take Fulbright money if you don't ever want to go back home. Don't do it. It's tempting to take the money and then you think you can change your mind once you get here. You cannot. Okay? Please remember that. As a general rule, you got to go home. And as a third example of the no objection statement, let's look at an example where I worked with 2 young ladies from Thailand, and at the time, the skills list from Thailand showed that if you worked in the hospitality industry in the United States, you needed to go back home to Thailand. These 2 young ladies got J-1 placement in jobs with a hotel chain that is worldwide. And they had sophisticated level jobs and they did them during the J-1 program. So what did they do? They wrote to the embassy of Thailand and they said, "Dear Thai embassy, we acquired skills in the hospitality industry and we acquired them while we had J-1 visas. Do you care? Do you really care if we don't go back home for 2 years? Can't we just stay and work as H-1B workers?" And the embassy said, "Of course we don't care. We have enough hotel workers. We have enough managerial staff in the leisure industry back in Thailand. We don't care if you come back or not." That is a classic example. Pfft, 2-year return home rule? I got to go home for 2 years? Pfft, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to stay here. I'll go from J-1 to F-1 student, and then I'll graduate as an F-1 student and get an H-1B eventually, and everything will be great, right? I can do that, right? Wrong. Here's why you need to deal with the 2-year rule. You got to deal with it because you can't do very much if you don't go home for 2 years. You got to get that waiver. Or else you cannot change your status from J-1 to H-1B. You cannot change your status from J-1 to another type of a work visa, except you could get an O-1. That's another story. You cannot adjust your status. If you're a J-1, now listen, seriously, if you're a J-1 and you have a 2-year rule and you fall in love with an American and you think, you know what, 2-year rule, forget the 2-year rule. I got this American, beautiful American, I'm just going to marry her and I'll be able to stay in America forever. And the answer is, you're going to go to the marriage case interview and the person behind the desk representing the immigration service will say, oh, I'm so sorry. You cannot get a green card through marriage. Why? Because I see no evidence in your file that you went home for 2 years. Just to clarify, if you have a J-1, you can change status to an O-1. You can. And you can change status to an F-1. You may have to go back home first and check in with the embassy, let them know that you know there's a 2-year rule and get an F-1 visa to come back. Or you may have to go back to the embassy and let them know that you know there's a 2-year rule, but you're getting an O-1 and you're going to come back to work as an O-1. Those specifics, whether you need to go back and get a new visa or not, just call us. But conceptually, that's the idea. The embassy wants to know that you're subject to a 2-year rule. And even if you turn to F1 or even if you turn to O1, everybody wants you to know that they know that you're subject to a 2-year rule. Here's a helpful hint. If you're not sure from your visa and your DS 2019 if you're subject to the 2-year rule, before you go through the time-consuming process of filing for a waiver, you might want to get an advisory opinion from the Department of State to confirm your understanding that you might be subject to this 2-year rule. Because your DS 2019 is silent and because your visa is silent, do not assume, I repeat, do not assume that you really are exempt from this 2-year rule. If you look at the skills list and your study or your work in America is on that skills list and your paperwork says you have no 2-year rule, you still might. How do you know you're subject to the rule when the paperwork says you're not? What? So, you can ask the Department of State for an advisory opinion. How do you get an advisory opinion? You go to the website I'm going to show you next. In summary, the J-1 visa category for exchange visitors can be a very pleasant experience and it could be very enriching, or it could be a relic of the Cold War 6 decades ago with this 2-year requirement that you got to go home after the exchange is over. Really? Can't I just post information on the internet and tell everybody how great America is? Do I really have to go home? It could be a nightmare. If you really don't understand, and here, this is the point, if you really don't understand what you're signing up for, if the J-1 program in your home country is oversold to you, and you think it is the magic way to get to America, and then you find out you've got to go back home and you don't want to, it's too late. So please, be an informed consumer. Please know what you're doing when you sign up for a J before you do it. I hope if you're watching this video, you do not yet have a J and you can make a logical, rational decision whether you want one or not. If you're watching this video and you already have a J and you need to know if you're subject to the 2-year rule, give me a call, send me an email, we'll figure it out.